guys, my name is Ryan. I am Allie's husband. So today I think we're just kind of going to talk about my conversion story to the Catholic Church. Just kind of go from the start to the end. So when I was younger, I was raised in the Lutheran Church. It was something that was kind of a family thing. My parents, my grandparents, and my siblings and I all went to the same Lutheran church. It was 10, 15 minutes from our house every Sunday, and go to Sunday school right after church, and then we kind of have like a little church lunch, brunch kind of thing down in the basement as well. It was not always something that I necessarily wanted to do, but something that we always did as a family. As I got older, we kind of had some issues, like family issues, maybe things that just kind of didn't work out with the pastor, and some things that were going on in our family with my grandmother, and it kind of left a bitter taste in the mouth of everybody in my family. My family stopped going there. The next couple of years were interesting because that pull to have to go to church every Sunday was no longer there, so it wasn't something that my parents were necessarily encouraging us to do as kids, to go to church. So my siblings kind of stopped going, and they were all younger, so it really wasn't something that they could decide that they were going to go to church. For myself, I still did want to go, and there was actually a church that was very close to our house. It was probably less than 2 miles away, that a lot of the kids that I went to high school with were there, and they had a really big youth program, and a lot of the guys that I knew in athletics and that were friends when I was in high school, they all went to that youth group. So I wanted to be a part of that, and I figured that that would be an easy place to kind of transition over. So I went from the Lutheran church to a Brethren church. I was in the Brethren church for, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years, probably from the time that I was 12 until 16, 17 years old. I'm kind of going back to both of these churches. Both, I never felt good after I'd leave the service. So it was always something that, whatever the pastor was talking about, it was something that, I would leave the church service feeling pretty terrible about myself. I say that like it was more of like a hellfire and brimstone kind of service. Specifically remember one when I was in the Lutheran church as a young kid, that the pastor told me that if you were ever angry at anybody, that it was basically like you would murder them in your mind, which was a sin. And if you were doing that too much, you were definitely going to go to hell. You're a 10-year-old kid, I got mad all the time, and I'm sitting there thinking like, man, I've murdered a lot of people in my head. This is bad. Like, I'm definitely going to go to hell. And I was always terrified. It was never good. It was never something that I felt like I was bettering myself for having done. It was more of something that I felt like I had to do. I don't know if it was like forced or what the feeling was, but definitely not a good one. So I go to this Brethren church. I was there for, it actually may have been closer to, maybe 5 or 6 years until I'd actually graduated from high school. A lot of my friends were there, went to youth group, had a great time. The services, again, were still something I couldn't really get my head around it. As I got older, I started asking more questions about the church. There were things that were in the Bible that didn't make sense to me, or not even so much, any of the moral teachings of the church, but more stories or parables or things that I would hear that were taken very literally when I was in the Lutheran church and at the Brethren church, that they didn't really leave any room for questioning. I always had a very hard time with that, and I would talk to the pastor about it, or I'd talk to my youth leader about it. Never really got any answers that satisfied me, that made me understand it more or believe it more. The longer I was at the Brethren church, there was even some more things that started not going so well, and one of those things was an issue with the deacon at the church. So one of my best friends had some issues where this guy was basically grooming him from a very young age, from the time that he was 8, 9 years old, all the way up until we were in high school. He actually told me a story about some of the weird things this guy was doing with him, and I'm not going to get into all the details, but just some weird things that were definitely not normal, definitely not appropriate. He came to me and kind of told me about it, and I was like, man, that's something that is not normal and should not be happening. But it had been happening to him for so long, and it had escalated over such a long period of time. I don't know if he just didn't realize it or just didn't know what to say to somebody. So that became a very big issue. It actually ended up getting Child Protective Services involved, and there ended up being a lot of stuff that we had to talk to kind of the other board members and deacons of the church and the pastor. And I remember one of the things that had happened was, it ended up getting in the news and talking about, these kids from a school are involved with this deacon, and I had some part in it, never anything too extreme, but I mean, he definitely did some things with me that were very odd. Like, he made me pull money out of a pocket of his once. He followed me to a girl's house when I had come back from a trip to a medical academy when I was in high school. He like saw my car on the road and followed me to this girl's house and was like asking me how it was. It was just very weird. But anyway, we had this meeting with the board members of the church and other things. And one of the things they told my friend and I were, you guys are lying for attention. Like, we know this guy, he would never do this stuff that you guys are saying he would do. Yeah, it was not a good situation. It actually really turned me off of the church. I went to college, so I was 17, 18 years old when that happens. I wouldn't say an atheist, but definitely very angry with the church. I had a lot of problems with, like I said before, a lot of problems with, certain things that I had questions about that I never got really good answers for. I had a long history of going to church and not feeling great about it. I, have this experience with the deacon that, had abused one of my friends, as well as members of the church kind of throwing it back in our face, saying that we were lying to them. Just was not a good look. And a lot of it, if you think about it, was not really the teachings of the church or, what's going on in the church. It was more just people. But, regardless, I go to college. I actually ended up going to a private Catholic university, interestingly enough, but had no faith. Did not have anything that I necessarily believed in, in the church. I thought that, a lot of it was just hypocrisy in people. I don't know. I just did not have a good opinion of the church at that time. Go to 2 years. The bitterness kind of fades. So I had a lot of less problems with the church. I didn't really have an interest in debating with anybody anymore about the merits of whether or not God exists and that kind of thing. But interestingly enough, I take a class at St. Francis, which was the only class that you had to take that was religiously based, which was Franciscan values. And the whole class was about the values that St. Francis had kind of put forward and, how those are implemented in the school. The professor that I had in that class was amazing. I would ask her questions all the time about questions that I had back when I was a kid, even, as a young adult. And she would always tell me, it seems like you were taught to read the Bible literally instead of reading the Bible critically. Like, a big part of faith is not that it's completely blind. Like, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to look for more information, to do research, to find answers. And it actually kind of even deepens, your faith. And especially for me, the more answers I was able to find, the easier it was for me to kind of have faith and change a lot of the opinions that I had. So, I have that class, things go very well. I actually ended up meeting my wife, Allie, as an RA at St. Francis. The longer that her and I were together, the more I realized I definitely wanted to marry her, and I saw a future with her. So I knew that if Allie and I got married, that we would have to raise our kids Catholic. I'd probably end up going to Mass all the time. So I knew that it was something that I wanted to at least understand. Another part of the church that I had growing up was there were times that, I'd talk with, I don't want to name specific people, but just, people in the church about other faiths or Christian faiths. And Catholicism was always like the black sheep. A lot of people would say that Catholics are, they think that they're better than you. They think that they're all going to go to heaven. Everybody else is going to go to hell. I think they have everything right. I definitely did not have a great opinion of Catholics from what I learned as a kid going into a Catholic university. So, I meet Allie and I realized that I were going to raise our kids Catholic, and all these questions are going through my head. But I wanted to know. I wanted to learn, at least so that if we were going to raise our kids Catholic, that I would understand the sacraments. I would understand what was going on if I was going to go to Mass every week. So I started RCIA just to kind of learn. Father Chris was my, kind of the mentor that I had through it. I was very lucky that because I was at a private Catholic school that it was only me and him. So my whole RCIA experience was one-on-one. I could ask a lot of questions. The more I learned about the Catholic faith, the more information I was given, the more it just made sense. The more questions that I had, I actually got answers to. I'll never forget this moment. I was sitting with Father Chris. We were in our little room talking, and he's asking me, he's asking me questions about what I think. And I said, Father Chris, I feel like Catholicism was, Christianity that was left when Christ died. Like, that's what Catholicism was. The disciples were Catholic, that's like original Christianity was Catholicism. And he was like, yeah, that's about right. And I said, and I feel like a lot of the Protestant derivatives, like a lot of the derivatives of Catholicism were kind of created by people taking parts of the church that they didn't like out or adding parts that they wanted in. And he was like, yeah, that's also about right. And I kind of looked at him, I was like, I feel like I've been lied to. Like, I feel like I didn't learn what Christianity was. And he kind of laughed and he was like, no, that's, not necessarily true. You could kind of see that I was becoming more and more kind of coming back. Because him and I had conversations before about what I believed, what I didn't believe. And he could kind of see that, the wheels were starting to spin in my head. And this whole time, I'm going to Mass with Allie every week. We're constantly talking about faith and God and that kind of thing. By the end of RCIA, I ended up saying that I wanted to convert to Catholicism. So Easter of my junior year of college is when I went through and was brought into the church. It was a great experience. Ever since then, every Mass I've been to, I leave Mass, I leave confession, I feel so much better. I still have questions. I mean, I still have parts that I don't understand, as well. But I feel much more like founded in my faith. And for that, I mean, it's changed my entire life. I used to have a very pessimistic attitude about a lot of things, especially, after everything that happened when I was graduating high school. And now I have, a lot more to live for, a lot more to be happy for than I used to. So it's definitely been a much needed and good change for my life. Over the past 5-6 years. So that's basically about it. If anybody's interested, I mean, I'm more than willing to make something else kind of explaining things a little further. This is kind of like a very brief overview. There's a lot more like little things that have happened in throughout, but just let me know what you guys think and we'll see what we can do. But I appreciate it, guys.